Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our final event today, our final panel in today's third day of our Energy Week, of our European Hydrogen Week. We will now get into a topic which is crucial for the hydrogen sector, because over many, many years we try to figure out what's the ideal place for the use of hydrogen. And when it came to mobility, maritime was always the thing that came to mind first, because hydrogen is not only something that will be shipped around the world by ships, land into ports, but it also is a fuel that could be used by ships to move from one place to the other. And as of next year, and we worked hard for that, a law kicks into action that forces basically builders of ships or users of ships to use hydrogen-based fuels. This is what we are going to discuss, and we will start our discussion today with an expert, with a gentleman who is dedicated to fuels in aviation but also in maritime. And it's also somebody who has this nice taste of organizing wonderful events like yesterday evening, because Christian Fauduc, who is here, the CTO of Smartenergy, has sponsored the wonderful evening. Thanks very much for that. And thanks for giving us some insights into what you deal with every day, how to use hydrogen, how to use this molecule in hard-to-abate mobility sectors like maritime. Christian, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Jorgo. And it's a great pleasure to be here and be joined by that great panel in a second, and I promise I think we'll have great discussions. This is a pleasure to look into on our strategy, the two most important segments, aviation and maritime, besides the industry we're working on. And the challenge right now is to understand how to bring hydrogen, we are here on the hydrogen conference, the hydrogen to the market, how to combine these two things that they fit together and they will happen. So let's have a look to what I called here the aviation web. The aviation web is aviation made our planet small. It connected us all together, and you can somehow see on that map where actually the movement is. You see there 10,000 airports. You see 67,000 routes across the world. COVID showed us one solution would be to just fly less. Well, we'll talk about this in a second. But what we also see is, where could we come close to the market with the hydrogen? Well, maybe where there is the most of the light, where it's the brightest. By the way, the brightest means the most of CO2 emissions there, which we have to care about. So looking into this chart gives us an idea that here in Europe we have a special responsibility, historically, but also to the actual moment of where the emissions are and where we can bring hydrogen effect to the market. If we look into the bright side, there's also the shorter distances, and we know there's other options to improve the situation on emissions. There is some thoughts of electrification on the short haul. There is the potential of directly using hydrogen on the mid-range. But on the long haul, which then goes across the ocean, obviously we know this is a challenge in terms of the energy density, in particular the volumetric density of the fuels. So EU has responded, EU has made targets, and this is one of the two segments where Europe has made binding targets to member states, then also to adopt, where there is penalties defined. And the targets, and that's important to say, is SAF, Sustainable Aviation Fuels, with a sub-quota from 2030 for eSAF, meaning the synthetic fuels done mainly then through the means of hydrogen. And this quota, 1.2%, doesn't seem so exciting. However, this is quite a relevant volume today, and to bring it to market, it needs to be fitting today's infrastructure, needs to fit today's logistics, the carriers we have, and also the price needs to fit. Also, the situation is not that we will reduce aviation. And you see the passenger numbers, they will kind of double. And it's one thing. I've been on the ICAO event recently, and it was really sad. The people don't want not to fly. They want to fly, but clean. And they want to fly even more. So we have to find a solution reducing CO2 emissions even faster than the growth of these passenger numbers. Okay, let's go into some numbers. And I said before, well, money rules the world. Somehow we have nice targets, we have nice talks about reducing CO2, but will the companies do it? So let's make a reality check on where we stand with the costs. And this is an exemplary calculation on how an Iberian project could look like. One of them we also do ourselves. And you can see that we reach levels around 3,000 euro per ton, 4,000 in the initial phase, with and this showing on dependence on the loading factor of the electrolyzer and the cost of the electricity, how you get there roughly. I mean, you can roughly say that, I mean, electricity is the main energy, the main part, again, on the cost. But then you reduce it by some sub-products you can sell. You get to the 4,000, and then you try to reduce it further, optimizing your supply, your scale, etc. However, today's level, I just say ballpark, maybe 1,000 euro per ton. There is a gap, and the question is how to make this work. However, and to say the penalty is, if you don't comply with the rule by 2030, the defined measure is, oh, you pay the double of the difference of the market price to the price which the ESAF would have been. Wow, this sounds like a strong argument. We'll discuss in the panel maybe why this would not do a lot of FIDs right away. Let's look into the setup of one of our projects, which in fact says, well, we have to go step by step, meaning doing an ESAF project is not only the hydrogen and then doing all the processes afterwards to get through either of the route Fischer-Tropsch or the methanol route to the ESAF. So with a cement industry in Portugal, we said there we can get the CO2 from, we can start the project, and then in a second phase, produce SAF for the market, ESAF for the market. Let's look in the shipping side. That's my shipping web. Shipping web, obviously, on the ocean. And a similar situation here, you have routes which are heavily used. And again, the shorter ones, there may be alternatives. I've been electric boating for 5 years ago, fighting hard for electrification of the boating sector. And we saw some successes, but on the longer term, doesn't work. Where is hydrogen right now the most close to the market? Well, if you do just, let's call it the push barges in the harbors to push, that's nice. You have a refueling station in the harbor, you can push, you can use hydrogen. I've been talking to Hamburg Harbor like 6-7 years ago about their ferries and then some other harbors, and we have Port of Rotterdam here, curious to see where it is. But from a certain point in time, they started to prepare all the ferries in the harbor to be ready for hydrogen. So it was diesel-electric propulsion, the diesel there, but already prepared that you can exchange with fuel cell and hydrogen. However, on the longer shipping side, all the experts say, well, this will not work with hydrogen. Ammonia and methanol are the preferred routes. So preferred routes, methanol, ammonia. And again, here we have decarbonization targets. And also here, there is expected penalties if you don't do it. Looking again here onto the main issue about the cost side. If you look here on the $10 per gigajoule on the conventional fuels, you can see, well, the closest are more the biofuels. But we know biofuels have a certain limitation in terms of volume. So on the longer term, the more expensive ones can come under. But the first one on the synthetic side is the e-ammonia, followed then e-methanol, e-LNG. So the question is, what is the one dominating? But again, here, we need to decarbonize faster than the market growth, which is expected. It's not doubling like in aviation, but still 50% maybe coming in the next decades. So what is the consequence or the result of a potential distribution of fuels in the future, and what is the role of hydrogen, and then the derivatives, very fast, as my time is running fast as well. Shipping energy consumption, from the conventional, you can see that there is a kind of a nice share between hydrogen, methanol, ammonia, biofuels. However, expectation that ammonia has a good position due to the cost reason mainly. It has other issues. We know that about what is the risk with ammonia, and can you manage that risk? On aviation, as mentioned before, there is approaches also directly with hydrogen. There is the technology for new aircrafts, but also here the bio and e-fuels have an important role to play. Having said all that, sailing is great, but switching off the engine is not a solution. We'll have to run them, and we know that the time of investment for ships is, so the lifetime is long. Interestingly, shipping container ships are a bit lower, which helps that the transition is a bit faster than some of the other ones. But this sail is interesting, I found, because do you have a guess how much percent of the energy is consumption is reduced by the sail of this one, at least according to the manufacturer? Who thinks less than 5%? Less than 10%? Less than 20%? Less than 30%? Less than 50%? Well, I should have done around, but they say 30%. I was surprised. I was surprised that this sail shall do 30%. Well, you can challenge them if you meet them. And my last slide, in fact, saying bringing things closer to the market. I must say that knowing the difficulties when you change infrastructure, when you change the vessels, it makes you feel that this is unreal. However, in Copenhagen, I had the privilege to visit MAN Energy, to see a megawatt scale ammonia running with bunkering, with all the system running in a safe place inside the city of Copenhagen, meaning there was no safety discussion that this is not possible and a too high risk to put it there, gave me the confidence that with hydrogen, with e-ammonia, and also the other route, methanol, we are quite close to the market, and we'll discuss whether the targets we have, the penalties we have, are sufficient to make the transition now. Thank you very much.
Fantastic presentation.
Thank
you, Christian. And I would like to discuss now with a distinguished panel with experts from different fields what you just alluded to. It's a fantastic opportunity, maritime, for hydrogen. Let's see how it works and whether it works. I would like to welcome here at the panel Fotini Ioannidou. She is the director of the Waterborne Transport Directorate at the European Commission. Applause for Fotini. Nils Anders Røkke, who is the Executive Vice President Sustainability at SINTEF from Norway. Paolo Cerioli, the Senior Vice President Innovation at Fincantieri, yesterday awarded one of the heroes. Next hero to come, René van der Plaas, Director of the Port of Rotterdam International. And Rogaciano Rebelo, the winner of the first tender of the Hydrogen Bank, the CEO of Madoqua Renewables. And I would like to start with Fotini, because you are responsible for the European Commission and the putting into practice of this wonderful new law that was, it's a part of Fit for 55, so it's a part of the whole package of how to make the European Green Deal happen. What are your expectations? You are also, I have to say this, Greek. By that, you know the superpower of the maritime fleets is Greece, by having more than 52% of flagged ships in Europe, and also globally it plays quite an important role. So in your double function as a Greek and responsible at the European Commission for these issues, what's your take on that?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. I guess I don't need to use another mic. You can hear me. Many thanks for the invitation. And indeed, in my directorate, we are working very hard in order to have everything ready for the entry into force of the FuelEU Maritime legislations on the 1st of January. And your keynote speaker here has already showed how things are going to evolve in terms of FuelEU. We have set targets that are very smooth in the beginning. Like 2% in 2025, and then going smoothly up. Our guess is that the targets we have set would require a strong presence of e-fuels at the latest as of 2035. And it is clear that when it comes to synthetic fuels, this is the future for maritime. It is clear that with biofuels, we are not going to meet those targets. So we are looking very much forward to have a good collaboration with this sector, because you are really crucial for maritime. To finish on the legislative framework, we are working hard to have everything ready in place, because we have plenty of secondary legislation that needs to be in place so that FuelEU works properly. And we have delivered all the main elements that are required. What we are seeing is that ships have already registered in a percentage of 80 or 90%. So the industry is getting ready. Many of them, more than 60%, have already provided their monitoring plans, which means their compliance strategies, how they are going to make it. Of course, the regulation is a kind of breakthrough regulation, so there are difficulties in terms of implementation, but both us and the European Maritime Safety Agency stand ready. We are organizing webinars, etc. And so our expectations is that the legislation will work smoothly as of next year. But in any way, we are here to facilitate in case of hiccups, and hiccups will be there, as we are the first jurisdiction in the world that is set in such a complete framework, tackling, the fuel demand, but also the supply, but also the infrastructure. So it's not only FuelEU Maritime, there are plenty of other legislations that are coming into play when we are speaking of decarbonizing maritime. Sorry, I took a lot of time.
Absolutely important, because we need to understand what is it. And Christian already in his keynote made slight criticism. He said maybe it's too smooth. Maybe the teeth that this regulation has is they are not strong enough to kick something off. But let us first talk with Mr. Røkke, who knows a little bit also the scientific approach. Why are biofuels, you mentioned them, Fotini, but especially also synthetic fuels in the maritime sector, so important in aviation and also in maritime? What distinguishes them from others?
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. First of all, I think it's the energy density, really, which means that we need to use these, especially in a transformation period, where we go from the maritime gas oils over to the sustainable fuels. And biofuels has its limitations in terms of the volumes which you can produce. Everybody wants to have biomass for various uses, you know. And I think it's really important that we look into where is it really needed, where is there no other alternatives. And it was alluded to in the introductory speech here about long-haul flights, and when you have deep-sea shipping as well, it's hard to find anything which is comparable. But I think it's really important that these solutions that we include that they really make a difference for climate. So, meaning that we need to look into what are the sustainability of these different value chains. Is it so that this is really reducing emissions? I mean, not just looking at the end emissions, but look for the whole value chain. When it's harvested, when it's produced, where is the carbon coming from? How did you produce that hydrogen? By what means, and so forth? You know, you could argue you need some grandfathering to make this into a working market, but I think it's really important that whatever we do and we see the end solution, which is going to be fully sustainable, that we use fuels which make sense for the climate. I think that's really important. And there was also alluded to the short shipping and batteries. I can also bring some experience from my country. I mean, we have something like 65 ferries now operating on battery. But for the longer haul, we also see there's a new project coming out now with hydrogen, whereas there's one liquid hydrogen from before. And there is a new project operating with a supply ship with one of the engines operating on ammonia. So we're going into that direction, introducing it, gradually increasing the range, and see what kind of fuels can fit into that.
Is it ammonia in fuel cells, or is it
it's ice.
It's ice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it's also possible to use fuel cells.
Yes. Actually, there's 4 engines in the ship, and one of them is converted to ammonia use then, based on the activities of a well-known Finnish manufacturer.
Excellent. Let's turn to the industry, because basically now we know ships need to put step by step some SAF, some sustainable fuels. We know that it's important, and we know why. But Paolo, tell us, what's the challenge for the industry? It's not so easy. What are your customers telling you? Are they going to pay the price? And what's the technological challenge also for you to produce these new products?
Yes, first of all, we are talking about energy transition. So the word transition is meaning the fact that there is not a long way, first of all. Second is there are some positive signals on the market on the technological perspective, but at the same time we have some challenges, okay, to facing it. If you talk about, let me say, energy for maritime and ship, we have 2 perspectives that can address quite properly the challenge and the positive aspect. The first one, we have the energy, the new green, or the new, let me say, new fuels. So in the maritime sector, we need to manage, to storage, and to usage. So the one perspective is positive on there, but at the same time, we have some challenges also in storage in the vessel, because the volume is not the same. So we are, let me say, expanding the volume for the same intensity of energy, first of all. So it's a matter of volume. It is not so easy to industrialize it. There are some challenges. Second part is on, let me say, the conversion, the energy conversion. So it's the systems. So we have 2 challenges on the same part, because the vessel is a combination of different systems. So, for instance, if we talk about hydrogen, we have to storage that are minus 252 Celsius degrees. So we need to have the, let me say, the space on the boat, on the ship, on the vessel, and manage the low temperature. At the same time, the volume. So, for instance, comparison and compare to the traditional fuels, we have more than 5 times of volume and the same, let me say, to have the same energy intensity. So the topic is that it's not only a matter of, let me say, new technologies that are starting to be available on the market, first of all. We need to invest strongly on the innovation, and at the European level, there are some, let me say, clear messages from also from, let me say, R&D effort, university, the different ecosystems are pushing a lot on that. But at the same time, we have some, let me say, challenge on marinization on that. So we are working on that part, for instance. So the logic is there are technological perspective, but there are some challenges that are related to availability, so in terms of infrastructure availability, in terms of economical perspective, so in terms of sustainability from economic point of view. So what we are saying that Fincantieri is, let me say, is the leader in manage the complexity. So we are focused on cruise and offshore vessels that are, let me say, the high level of complexity. So we are system our vessels are a system of systems. So we are integrator of different technologies. So the energy transition is one of the key pillars of our strategic plan, and we are working strongly on that in order to, let me say, to manage and to lead the energy transition for the maritime in our sector. We are strongly committed on that. At the same time, we have to say that there is no silver bullet. So coming back to the word transition, there is a combination, let me say, of technology or, let me say, approach, and we want to manage all this kind of solution that probably, and let me say, in reality, is a combination of different technology also in the vessel. So currently, we are talking about vessels or ships that are, let's say, monofuel. Tomorrow, today, but also tomorrow, we'll have dual fuel or tri-fuel, managing battery, managing traditional fuels, plus e-fuels or other kind of, let's say, vectors. So the complexity is increasing, but it's something that is distinguished the, let me say, the European industrial competencies, and at the same time, what we want to be there. So what is leading, let me say, our strategy is to be competitive on, let me say, high-end and premium products.
So despite the complexity, I have to say Fincantieri was for a long time and stays very committed to hydrogen as one solution. Also running the Renewable Fuels Alliance, which is something we have served as Hydrogen Europe as a secretariat here. And it's important to see commitment of companies into these industrial gatherings together with the European Commission to really make the shift. But you also mentioned infrastructure. That brings me to René, because ports need to be ready for these different new fuels. The biggest port of Europe is Rotterdam. You are representing Rotterdam here. How are you preparing for these new fuels? Is that an important part of your work?
Yeah, of course, it is a very important part. I think the entire energy transition is one of the key priorities for the Port of Rotterdam. And actually, it's quite interesting to see what's happening, because it's not only very important for the Port of Rotterdam, but also for the other Dutch seaports and also for the Port of Antwerp-Bruges. And what we see is that, you know, where we were always competing in many fields, we are also collaborating on introducing the new energy system for Europe. And that is important because nowadays, I think some 13% of the total energy demand in Europe is imported through the Port of Rotterdam, mainly in oil and LNG. And in gas and other oil products. And that will change. So in the future, you know, it will not only be the Port of Rotterdam as the main import hub for energy for Europe, it will also be the other ports that need to take their part in that. So this collaboration is very, very important, because it's not about the transition for the handling of the cargo, it's a transition for the industry. So that's the first remark that I would like to make. If it comes to shipping and shipping lines, we really look at trying to optimize and trying to create efficiencies in the full cycle of the vessel, so from origin to destination. So we are working on green hydrogen corridors, working together with other big bunker hubs in the world, focusing on more efficient shipping. Port call optimization is an important topic in our port. And of course, bunkering and bunker fuels as well. We are preparing ourselves for that. We are really focusing on the first stage. You know, it is nowadays still bio. Maybe also nice to mention that we handle some 10 million tons of bunker fuels in the Port of Rotterdam, of which now already 8% is blended biofuels. So I think that's important to mention. But as already mentioned, the future is the synthetic fuels, and you know, we are investing in that. We are looking into opportunities. We are trying to promote legislation, discuss things with the market, looking where the hydrogen is available to make it also available for our customers. Also in collaboration, for example, with my neighbor here in this panel. So it is, for us, it's a key priority, and we are preparing ourselves for the future, and we think that the future is also looking very promising.
Excellent. Good to hear that it's on the way. You are a role model for many other ports globally, but especially also in Europe. and you mentioned Rogaciano already. I said he won. He was one of the big winners for the first auction of the Hydrogen Bank that was launched a year ago here in this room by the Dutch Commissioner, Wopke Hoekstra. You are producing, basically, you are bringing renewable energy into the molecule, but you need customers. So is this enough, what we see here on the table for you?
I would say no. Let me be blunt about it, okay? We can do much more, and if we really want to meet our targets in 2030, we need to do much more than what we have already done, okay? The off-takers are not motivated to sign off-take. I can say it in whichever way you want, but the reality is the companies, it can be a ship owner, it can be an airline, or it can be an industry. They are just not used to signing an off-take agreement that would put €500 million to €1 billion of liability on their balance sheet. Because today, you just go to the fuel pump and you just pump out your fossil fuel into your tank. And now we are telling them, hey guys, listen, we are going to come with an e-fuel. We can put whatever names we want, green, renewable, whatever. We are going to come with an e-fuel. But if you want it, you need to sign 15-year off-take, 10-year off-take, because the bank is not going to give us the money. Because these are all project financed based projects. This is not a big, massive company that comes with their balance sheet and says, I have €8 billion on my balance sheet, so I'll finance this. All those guys have gone home. The reality is, in the last 6 months, the 7 big names we all know about have decided to shut their shop. And they've said, we are not going to do this green transition anymore for all different kinds of excuses that they have, right? So the projects that are surviving today are project financed. They're not balance sheet projects. To make that work, you need long-term offtake. Customers are not used to that. And that needs to change. Does it mean we need more regulation? Well, it's sometimes good, sometimes bad to introduce a lot of regulation. But there has to be consequences for not doing what we are supposed to do. But if we just put it as targets and goals to have, then that's as good as it can get, right? But it should be, if we don't meet the target, then we are going to have these consequences. And those consequences need to come in sooner if we want to meet the goals.
And with penalties. Huh?
And so with penalties.
If you don't follow the law, you should have penalties. And I think, Fotini, this is not yet clear, which are the penalties. Also, we have the IMO. Well, we have the International Maritime Organization, which is strong. So that's an asset in the maritime sector. We have this strong international institution dominated by a lot of Greeks there, but that's why your role is very important. Can we involve to a certain extent this IMO, and also which is the penalty scheme that it's good to be blunt. I like it because we need to understand how these regulations help us or even harm us, because if Europeans have to do that, others do not, and the IMO is totally out, then European penalty might really, well, lead to effects that we don't want. Fotini,
yes.
You want to comment on that?
Yes, I'd like to comment. Yes, of course. We have in shipping a global regulator who is the IMO. And for now, we are the only region that has introduced such a complete scheme. And next year, we have really a breaking moment. So in spring next year, IMO is debating, and hopefully adopting what we call midterm measures. So it will be a basket of measures somehow similar to what we have in Europe if everything goes well. So they will be, we are debating about a FuelEU Maritime-like concept, so a concept like the one you have seen where you would be obliged to gradually reduce your energy intensity on board or your carbon intensity on board. And we are speaking of a pricing scheme. Now, this is a big organization, 176 member states, so the fact that we are going to have something good and ambitious is not given, but as Europe, with many other partners, we are working hard to make it happen. So, of course, if IMO adopts such measures, this will completely change the landscape globally and, of course, for Europe. At the end, that's what we want to achieve. We want to achieve global regulation. It's also for the benefit of our own industry, and, of course, for the climate. But I would like to comment on one or two more things I've heard. So you sent FuelEU Maritime, it's having too smooth targets, or that has been eluded. But I'd like to remind that FuelEU Maritime has a special place for synthetic fuels, because synthetic fuels are counting double. It's like a way to compensate for their high price. And so FuelEU has, in addition, something that we call a sunrise clause, that if synthetic fuels in the market are not sufficiently high, in 2034, there is a sub-target that kicks in. So just to say, I'm not saying that this is enough, but for me, the real question is what is going on, why we cannot, what are the underlying causes, and we don't see projects coming, into the light, how we can scale up the production of RFNBOs, how we can close the price gap. These are, I don't think that our legislation that is today in place prohibits this. And I mean, we have the same situation more or less in aviation, if it can be also worse compared to maritime. So we have a problem there that we need to really understand and analyze what is going on. It's interesting to hear from you that these people are not used to have offtake agreements, but maybe there is something more to as underlying cause. For me, that will be the challenge. How can we really scale up these fuels, and how we can reduce the price gap?
Yes, you mentioned already mandates, and I think in aviation it's a little bit more strict. Nils Anders, I would like to ask you to compare both, and maybe you have an idea because you overlook the developments there. We heard already it's smooth, you're very blunt. What's your take? Do we need clearer mandates? There's a sub-target kicking in, correct? Does it come early enough, too late? What's your take?
So it's quite a question you're posing to me, you know. I see everybody's looking at me, you know. What am I going to say here? I think predictability is extremely important, you know, to get these kind of investments going. And ship owners, for instance, they need to know what are the rules for the future. And I think those kind of rules have a very disciplinating role in terms of what will happen in the future. I've seen that in my own country, saying that all cars have to be zero emission by 2025, or all policies should point towards only fossil-free cars being sold in 2025. It's had a tremendous effect on the market, you know. And I think putting up the rules now on the amounts which is going to be needed by the different time frames will have a very strong leading and guiding effect on what is going to be done in that space. So when you talk about, as I said earlier, I think the starting point is really that it has to make sense for the climate, what we do in it. And I think that the putting up regulatory certainty is extremely important, and any kind of relaxation would need to be, in my view, capped in a very short time to get a market going, because, again, it has to make sense for the climate.
But you mentioned combustion. We talked about combustion and fuel cells.
Yeah.
It has to make sense for the climate. Would it make sense to follow the line of the road mobility where we said we ban combustion as of 35 for new cars? Is that something you would like to see here, also to enhance basically alternative fuels?
Well, I think it's, I mean, long-haul flights and maritime sector is quite a different issue, I think, than cars. So, but I think going in that direction will have a tremendous effect, in my view.
I would like to hear the comment of Paolo from the industry. What? Because we see ban of combustion has had interesting effects on European industries.
Burning hydrogen doesn't matter, you know. Burning ammonia is okay as well, you know. But when you are re-emitting carbon, I'm a bit more skeptical.
Yeah, but that was done in road mobility. You ban one technology, and you are impacting markets very much so. So I know Germany best, and I can see that deindustrialization has been started because of that. Not because it's the wrong technology, but because the Germans don't have the supply chains to continue to build all this. I would be interested how this new regulation affects the shipbuilding industry. And Paolo, you are very much involved. Do you think that it helps you to go into these new directions as being one of the front runners? Or would it harm?
Yes, I think that overall the direction that we are moving in terms of European level regulation is, let me say, serving the street in the right direction, but there are a lot of things to do. Again, there are some combination of aspects. It is from regulation from one side, there is also the policy on the other side, but it's a combination of other aspects like technological, infrastructure, technology availability, cost perspective. So there is no only one aspect that is driving one direction rather more than another, or vice versa. There is a combination because, for instance, we were talking before, when we are talking about LNG is a story, if we are talking about ammonia is another story for different aspects, okay? So also in terms of availability, we are talking about biofuels. Biofuels in terms of infrastructure probably now is more, let me say, ready and available on the market, but there are some limitations on other aspects. If we are talking about hydrogen, we are talking is something that is, let me say, clear in terms of net zero, no? In terms of molecular, is quite clear, but is some complication other aspects. So there is no a clear, let me say, direction, okay? But it's a combination of factors. But one element is clear that there is, if we want to be competitive, long-lasting, let me say, in terms of competition, we need to, let's say, to drive and to manage the innovation currently, because we are facing as, let me say, I want to say transformation in terms of industrial point of view, but for sure it's a strong evolution on that. So the key elements behind, from industrial point of view, are, let me say, three elements. It is one is manage complexity and be at the edge of technological perspective. The second is pretty clear the fact that the supply chain for us in terms of shipbuilder is clear. So the integration with supply chain. So also being next to our supplier and the yard. And so the ecosystem that you are building is quite clear and strong on that. And the third element is the investment in research and development, innovation, not only from industrial perspective, but also from ecosystem, meaning new solution coming from consortium, coming from university, coming from, let me say, startups. So we are talking about new technology. We are talking about acceleration, the energy transition. Our target, for instance, is to achieve net zero in 2035 before the 2050. So we set clear target and we are moving in that direction. And it's combining different aspects, competencies, and the stakeholder involvement in order to achieve this kind of, let me say, target. Fincantieri, in reality, is one of the key enablers of maritime transition. Because, let me say, the vessels stay, let me say, at sea, 20 years at least, 30 years, depends by vessel, but cruise, for instance, is quite a big challenge at vessel.
And we are proud that we have in Europe still this industry. We will have in our last round a talk about competitiveness. And I would also invite, if somebody has a question, to raise the arm, and so we know where to bring the microphone. However, we talked about different fuels. Ammonia, we heard about methanol. I'll come to methanol in a second with a Maersk example. I have a question to you. But René, are you preparing for many different fuels? What's your strategy? What's your view on the development over the next years? So how is the market developing out of your view?
Yeah, first I would like to make a remark on the development of the market, because I think what is for ports very important, but I think for the entire industry as well, is that we have to consider that we have become very, very good the last decades in making mature markets more efficient and growing mature markets. Well, this is establishing an entirely new market, and it also brings entirely new challenges, also for us as ports. So if I look, for example, at planning infrastructure, and then I come to your question on what we are preparing for, is we are very good, or have become very good in planning infrastructure based on traffic forecasts and prognosis. And then just foreseeing, there will be capacity constraints at a certain moment in time, and that's the moment in time that you need to invest in infrastructure. And then many times off the balance sheet, from the balance sheet, or in project financing, but relatively low risk. And that is entirely different in the market today, as already said, but that is also for ports. So for ports, it's important to create infrastructures before the volumes arrive. And we are anticipating, if it comes to the maritime fuels, on basically everything, as we see that shipping lines did not make their choice yet at this moment in time. And I think they also cannot make the choice yet, because there are still so many options, and it's not very clear what will happen. What we do see is, because we also already got a lot of fuels in our port, that the synthetic fuels, might be relatively easy to accommodate because infrastructures and terminal capacity is already available, while the investment in hydrogen solutions require really new investments and new visions to that. And we are already investing in that, in pipeline infrastructure, terminal capacity. There's a lot of plans coming on steam. But we are preparing basically for everything, because we see that shipping lines still keep their options open.
Well, one of the biggest name in shipping lines, Maersk, took a decision, went for methanol, and there was this in a Danish project, Flagship 1, and something happened there. Because I personally got a phone call by Ørsted the very day when they announced that they would scrap, not delay, scrap the project. So it was an honor for me to be called 2 hours before, but basically it didn't help it. Basically they said, no, we are out of it. Although Maersk did say we go to e-methanol, but they bought it in China. What can we do? I mean, I know that the next tender of the European Hydrogen Bank will also contain one basket on maritime, which is my question to you. Is that something which helps? You went now through that tendering process. You did need to present a very low price, which is a challenge for you, I know. Are we competing with the rest of the world? How can it be that inside Denmark something like this happens and basically puts at stake the whole European competitiveness? Not a good signal.
When we see the regulation that has come out for what is an RFNBO fuel, right? I mean, it's not like you can just sell electric fuel. It needs to comply with certain requirements. The way the regulation is set up, it's for Ethiopia on day one. We want a Eureka moment from day 0 and then Ethiopia on day 1. What I mean by that is that we have added additionality, temporal correlation, everything else on top of it to make RFNBO compliant e-fuels. That's a huge undertaking because the producer of this fuel, which is us, we are like a sandwich. We are the meat in the middle of two pieces of bread. One on the left-hand side is the energy market. On the right-hand side is the fuel market or the off-takers. The energy market is not cheap. They want us to pay a lot of money for the PPAs, and you've seen some of the numbers over there, 90 euros a megawatt hour, 60 euros a megawatt hour, okay? And on the other side, you have the off-takers who says, hell no, we are not going to pay that. It doesn't matter if I have come up with a formula that says grey plus CBAM, and then I have to pay a premium. They're like, I'm not paying a premium, I have cheap fuel. So it's that situation that you're in, right? So now you put Flagship 1 in that whole circumstance. The volume they can produce is small. It's a very expensive project to build just because of the sheer nature of the capex that is there. Commodity markets are based on volume. If you don't have a sufficient amount of volume, you don't have a business case because then you cannot get the cost curves right. It's just simple math, right? So this is the reality which we are working against. Well, you can get renewable fuel in China, you can get renewable fuel in India. Is it RFNBO compliant? Are they going into additionality? Are they doing temporal correlation?
Do they have bidding zones?
Do they have bidding zones? Let's add a few more to it. Yes, it's cheap, but it's not apple to apple. I mean, if we don't have to do all of it, we are also cheap.
I like your way to be very, very blunt. I mean, India is our partner country. We have Mr. Hydrogen from India here in the room, Abhay Bakre, and India reminds us, how can we import possibly green ammonia cheaply to you if we don't even have bidding zones? We cannot be in compliance with your regulation. And I love this to discuss it because it's one of that told you so moments. We told the Commission. No? We told the Commission, you're not to blame, Fotini. It originates at your partner, DG Enner, and it's clearly to say. But it's a problem. It is a problem if we impose to ourselves things that cannot be implemented. And the first projects now are scrapped. And that's what I would like to discuss the last 5 minutes here with you. How can we understand that competitiveness is not something that you inherit because you're European. You need every day to fight for it. So we heard your view. You want to add on that? Because I want to have your view on competitiveness. What would you expect in the maritime sector from all your different perspectives to be changed? And Fotini is the last, so she can collect and assess, to be changed currently in order to keep us competitive. We start with you.
Well, let me just throw it out there. We are producing e-fuels. We can put whatever names we want, green, but it does make a difference when you say renewable fuels. We are producing e-fuels which are RFNBO compliant. That's what our focus is. And it has to be the same product that comes from everywhere else for us to have a level playing field. In terms of competitiveness, I believe we need to have a lot more work to be done on the electricity side of the market because it's an e-fuel, right? And we also need to do a lot of work on the side of the commodities, the market, because we are dealing with a fuel that does not exist. We're dealing with a market that does not exist. And we are dealing with a price curve that does not exist. So how are you going to create it? It will start small. It'll be bilateral agreements, but there has to be some incentive on the other side for those bilateral agreements to come into place. And then you can have at the beginnings of a e-fuels industry to come online. That's basically the LNG in the 1990s.
But we have more hurdles and bottlenecks than the LNG back then, or look at the renewables with the feed-in quotas. That was also open the door. In our case, we have open a little bit and then close it again.
Yeah.
So difficult. Ports, competitiveness of Europe. Well, how do you see it?
Yeah, I think the energy transition, now is key for our industry and key for ports and maritime. I think that is very, very clear. And I think it's very important to take away first mover disadvantages. So I see that it is so difficult, both at supply and demand side, to get projects started and to really, accelerate developments. And I think taking away the first mover disadvantages is very, very important.
Thank you very much. Now the ship industry.
Yes.
It's a flagship for Europe. Huh? It's a flagship for Europe, although we lost a lot of building capacity, especially to China, Taiwan, and others. How can we keep it?
I think that, let me say, as other sectors, one of the key elements is the technological innovation and capacity to combine, let me say, the premium, that's complexity, okay? So manage the complexity in the maritime is something that is clear, and the clear factor that is differentiating European, let me say, shipbuilder versus other. So the logic is moving always, as in the past, always and strongly on how to integrate the new opportunity coming from the energy transition, for instance, but it's combining also with digital evolution. So there are in front of two key elements: the evolution from energy perspective combined with technology and digital in order to manage the energy transition, because there are two folds of the same, let me say, two areas of the same, let me say, evolution, and we have to be, let me say, leader on that in order to set the pace. And then the second phase is moving on other sector or other, let me say, sub-sector in maritime that should be less complex than where we work every day, that is our high complexity market.
So innovation is key, but I want to remind everybody, we Europeans are great in research, turning money into knowledge. We are a little bit less efficient in turning knowledge into money in innovation, but can be changed. Let's consider this week here as the starting point of the new strategy. Nils Anders.
Yeah, it's a kind of a very nice transfer to myself, actually, and the research and innovation, obviously, coming from a research and innovation institute. I think research and innovation will be key in terms of creating the competitiveness of Europe, also in this field, as also been alluded to by, for instance, the Draghi report, putting research and innovation at the core of the transformation to become more productive and so forth, and also the Heiter report asking for a much higher budget for the next framework program. And I think it's, this is about short and long term. If you're going to go to net zero, which everybody thinks that's a good idea, I think, you need to work on solutions you know will work in the 2050 society. On that route, you will have different solutions, obviously, and I don't think we should regulate so much that we don't get this activity going. We need to push for the solutions we know which are working, and we know where the end is. The end solution, so to speak, is that it's going to be based on renewable fuels in the future.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Fotini, you heard a lot of ideas.
Yes.
How is the Commission, European Commission, commenting on all that?
Well, there has been so much said here, it's difficult that I cover everything. You have criticized, if I understood well, the RED, the high targets, the complexity of the RED. I understand, at least that's our take in maritime, that these rules, complex or not complex, apply to everybody. So for us, the ships that bunker in every part of the world, they need to be RED compliant. So from the shipping perspective, you are not put in competitive disadvantage. Just to say, there are, for me, okay, we have regulated in Europe. We'll see if there is a need to simplify. For all our legislation, there are review clauses. We are trying to make a big change in IMO to have global rules, which will be important for e-fuels. We have set up these soft measures like the RLFC Alliance, and thank you very much, Fincantieri, for all the work you are doing there. And indeed, now our colleagues in DG Climate are in the final preparations for the publication of an auction where there will be 200 million reserved for maritime fuels. So maybe we are in the starting phase. What is clear is that when we look at the next Commission and the priorities, it is clear that our President has sent the Green Deal and the competitiveness need to go hand in hand. And when we are speaking of the e-fuels, it's clear as well, and the decarbonization of maritime, it's clear as well that we need to go a few things differently more in order to boost the production of e-fuels and to diminish the price gap. So from that perspective, it's already in the mission letter of Commissioner Gigi Costas that he will prepare a strategic transport investment plan, and this will be the main theme to take a strategic view. The complexity in maritime is that you do not have one size fit solution. So you have many different solutions. But the strategic transport investment plan will be there especially to look how to boost the production and to diminish the price gap for aviation and maritime fuels. And of course, fuels will play an important role. And that's why we are interested to understand why these projects do not there are not enough projects today, that there are so few projects, and it would be very important to hear from you what needs to be done to the risk investments. And there are two other things I'd like to say. We will be preparing a port strategy. It will be linked to security for indirect investments, but the energy transition in ports will be a super important element. And so there we would like to hear from ports that would like to develop as energy hubs if there are constraints that we can tackle, that we can address. And last point, Fincantieri, you know, we will prepare in a maritime industrial strategy because, as you said, it doesn't, we are still leaders in complex shipbuilding, but we have lost a lot of market. So we need to preserve the whole ecosystem in Europe, the whole waterborne ecosystem, and of course our shipbuilding and marine equipment manufacturing industry is very dear to us. But I have taken a lot of notes of the ideas. I think we need more analysis. Thank you.
Excellent. Many, many thanks. I think, can we take one last question? If you come here, I hope. Does it work? The microphone? Mic.
Hello, thank you. My name is Line Hebbelstrup. I'm from European Energy, and I just feel called to correct one small thing. Of course, we have struggles in this production, but it's not true that Maersk is not going to sail on European energy. Soon, we will open our first e-methanol production. It's going to be the world's largest e-methanol production, and Maersk is one of our customers. So, of course, we are struggling in this sector, as everyone here are aware of, but I think it's important not to create false dichotomies. And I think also it's important in this discussion to look at how we are subsidizing the production. For the last years, the subsidies for fossil fuel production has doubled. And then we are discussing how green fuels are not competitive enough. But maybe we should look at what we are putting our money in. So it was more a comment than a question.
No, it's a very valuable and very important comment. By the way, we didn't want to put false information here into that thing, but I got this information by a high Maersk representative last week in Baku during COP, during the energy dinner with Commissioner Simpson. and he was asked by the Ørsted guy, why on earth did you do that? And he answered, Chinese was cheaper. So that was not me, I just conveyed a message. However, you have an absolute point. If we compare the trillions of dollars, because the IMF gave this in dollars, that have been put into fossil subsidies, the last figure we know is 7 trillion globally in 1 year. You end up in a discussion comparing apples with pears, of course. So, indeed, we cannot compete with the subsidy and the existing markets. However, if I could formulate a dream, because after our discussions, something sounds Greek to us, especially also because the next commissioner, Apostolos Tzitzikostas, will be a Greek. My dream would be indeed that we start smoothly and slowly, but then get to bigger, clearer targets, and according to what Mr. Draghi said, understand that we only can stay competitive if we also put real money to it. The port strategy might be one way to do it, and we can not hide, but use the port strategy in order to enable you to buy his product, to help him having easier access. And this is important. And Mr. Draghi also said that it's a lot of money we need to invest. We need to understand that times have changed. There are two big animals, China and US, that we are competing with. And this is real, and this is a very important thing. And also, having said he's Greek, Greece can play a role here, could play a role. And to be honest, as also half Greek, I would like to see a more active role, and let's do everything we can do in order to get this country also more active in London in the IMO, because without the IMO, we cannot do it. We need the world community to see us as front runners, but not as idiots and naive people. Thanks very much indeed. Thanks for your comment. Thanks for today's debate. And that ends basically the discussion in that room. I would like to say that the Clean Hydrogen Partnership Awards will be given as of now, as of 5 o'clock, in the Innovation Forum in Hall 7. Whoever is interested in that awards or is getting an award, please run there, because you shouldn't lose out on that. Thanks very much. See you tomorrow morning here in that room. Thank you.